Hey guys, and welcome to another one of my tutorials. And this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to set up different footstep sounds for different material types. So you can see as I walk around on this wood material, it plays a footstep sound for wood. And when I go over to the grass, it plays one for grass. And you can see the particle effect also changes a little bit as well. You can see it's a little bit brown here, and when I go to the grass, it's a little bit lighter. So these are just effects and sounds that I grabbed from offline. Obviously, they're not perfect or anything like that, but for your own project, you can, of course, replace these with your own effects. And then one more thing I want to mention real quick. This tutorial isn't anything like super revolutionary. There's other tutorials online that cover this in a pretty similar way that I'm going to be covering it, because there's really only one way to do something like this. I have made a few changes to make it a little bit nicer and easier to use, but this isn't anything like super revolutionary that you're not going to find anywhere else. But I think my way is probably a pretty good way to do it. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So open up the Epic Game Launcher and launch whatever version of Unreal you're on. I'm currently on 4.24.3. And we're going to be using the third-person blueprint, so come down here and select Games and hit Next. And we want to use the third-person template, like I mentioned. So go ahead and hit Next. And we want blueprints, and we want the starter content, because the starter content is going to have the materials we want. So let's just rename this Footstep Tutorial, and we can go ahead and create the project. So the first thing we're going to want to do once this loads is import the assets that we're going to be using. So let me real quick move this off to the side. All right, so in the description of this video, I'll have a link to this folder, just in case you want to use the sound effects that I have. But if you already have your own, then you can skip this step. But we're just going to import these real quick. So copy the ones from the folder that you get from the download, and go to the content folder of the project that you just created, or your project, and I'm just going to paste them right here in the content folder. And then as soon as we do that, and we come back to the content directory, you can see that they show up right here. So these are just sound waves. If you're not super familiar with how sounds work, sound waves are pretty much the most basic type of sounds. They just represent a sound file, and you can just kind of play it to see what it sounds like. But in order to actually play these in the world, it's better if they are inside of a sound cue, because it allows you to use them in 3D space, and also allows you to kind of modify the sounds a little bit. So we're going to create two sound cues, one for the wood and one for the grass. So to do that, just select the grass and right click on it and say create cue, and we'll just call it SC for sound cue, and let's think grass footstep. So inside of here, if you double click on it, it'll open something like this, and you can see it's just it just has our grass sound effect hooked up to the output, so it's just going to return that every time. But we want to alternate between them because we have two different footsteps for grass. So if you copy this and paste it, it will create a new one, and then we can come up here and change this to our other grass sound effect. So then we have two, and we essentially just want to alternate between these. So there's actually a random node. If you right click and search for random, you can hook it up to the input pins like this, and then use that for the output. And actually, if you look at random, the reason why it's going to alternate every time is because of this little checkbox right here where it says randomize without replacement. So it's essentially saying, choose a random one of these, but don't play the same one twice in a row. And since there's only two, it's going to alternate. And you can actually test it if you come up here and hit play. You can see each time I hit play, it alternates between them, which is exactly what we want. All right, and then we want to do the same thing for the wood. So if we right click on this and say create sound cue, we'll call this SC again for sound cue, and wood, if I can spell, wood footstep. And then again, we want to copy this one and paste it and change it to the other one. And then we're going to use the random node again. And if you have more than just two, this is going to work as well. You can just hit this little add pin button and keep hooking up different sound effects to play if you have more than just two footstep sounds. And this random node will kind of take care of the rest for you. And again, just to test, See, it alternates between our two different sounds. So that's looking pretty good. And then the other thing we need to import is our sound effects, or sorry, our particle effects. So for that, I just use the Infinity Blade sound effects. And those are actually free to download. So if you go to the marketplace and you search for, I think it's called Infinity Blade. Actually, what is it called? Let me go to my library and just look. Yeah, so this one, Infinity Blade : effects. So this should be free to download. It's just a bunch of effects. But again, feel free to use other effects if you have other effects. These are just the ones I'm going to use for this tutorial. So once you have this one downloaded from the marketplace, just hit add to project and then find your project. What do we call it? Footstep tutorial, and hit add to project. So that will take a moment or two, but once it's done, this folder will show up in the content directory for Infinity Blade effects. And so inside of here, there's just a bunch of different particle effects for all sorts of stuff. So actually, while that's doing that, let's just real quick move these into a folder. So I'm going to right click and make a new folder and just call it audio. And go ahead and drag these guys in. Say move here. Okay, yeah, so we got the effects now and we got the audio, so now we can actually start working on the code behind it. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we need to create different surface types. So if you come to the project settings under edit project settings and you search for surface, you can see it pops up this list of all these different custom surface types that you can define. And currently it's just a bunch of nones because there's none defined. So we want to add two. We want to add one for the grass, so I'm going to call this grass, and we want to add one for wood. And then one thing you need to do, I'm not sure why this really doesn't work, but for whatever reason, every time I try to add these, I have to restart Unreal in order for Unreal to recognize them. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick. So make sure you go to File and Save All and make sure everything's saved before you restart. But once you have those two added, just go ahead and let's just restart the project. Again, I don't know why that's the case really, but it just is. So it only takes a second to restart. And then once that's restarted, Unreal should be able to recognize them. So to make use of those, we need to create something called a physics material. So if we right click and go to physics, and there's this option here for physical material, we want to create two of these. So I'm going to create one and select physical material for the parent and hit select, and we'll call it PM for physical material, and then underscore grass. I'm just going to right click and duplicate and call this one PM underscore wood. So now if you open these up, the only real thing we need to specify here is the surface type. So if you hit this dropdown, you'll see it shows the two custom surface types that we just created. So for the grass one, select grass, and for the wood one, select wood. And there's some other things in here you can look at, like the friction of the material and stuff like that. But for this tutorial, we're just going to be focusing on the surface type. All right, so now we have two physical materials set up, and each one knows what surface type it is. So now we need to associate these physical materials with materials inside of the game. So let's go ahead real quick and kind of divide this floor up into two different materials like I had at the beginning. So I'm just going to delete this, and I'm actually going to use if I go to geometry and the box, I'm actually going to use the box for this just because it looks a little nicer whenever you apply material to it. So we want to change the size of it so it's a little larger. So I'm going to change the X to 2000 and the Y to like 5000. We'll kind of drag this down. Oops, drag this down a little bit so it's below the feet, something like that. And then scoot it over. And then if you hold down Alt and drag, it will actually make a copy of it. So we'll copy it, move another one over here a little bit, just so they're touching, something like that. All right, so on the right here, we want to have the grass. So if we search for grass, we have this grass material. And if we search for wood, and feel free to use whichever one you want. I'm going to use this walnut polished one. So go ahead and add that. So like I was saying before, we need to associate these materials with the physics materials that we created before. So if you double click on one of these, it will open up the material inside of the material editor. And the only thing we really need to do inside of here is click on this node over here on the right, and then at the top, there's an option to specify a physical material. And so we want to, of course, select the one that's associated with this type of material. So this is wood, so we want to search for PM_wood and select that. And then make sure you hit apply up here at the top, so it actually applies it. And then save, and then we can close that. And then we want to go back to our grass. So open up the grass material, and we want to do the same thing. Select the node on the right, and set the physical material to PM_grass. And then make sure to hit apply and save. And we can close that. All right, so now we have our materials associated with our physical materials. The next step we need to do is detect whenever our character steps on the ground so that we know when to play the sound and when to play the effect. So to do that, we're going to open up the character's animation blueprint. So if we come back to the content directory and we go to the, I think it's in third person, meshes, no, where is it? Mannequin, yeah, mannequin, animations, and then third person anim blueprint is the one we want. So actually, no, not quite here yet. We need to adjust the animations first. So yeah, inside of this folder, these are the animations for the character that I'm using. So we want to add some notifies to the walk and the run, because those are the two where he's actually stepping. So let's open up the walk first, and I'm just going to go ahead and pause this. So we just want to drag this little red bar at the bottom to wherever he takes a footstep. So there's one right there. And then up here at the top in the notify section, we want to right click and add a notify and new notify. And then it's going to want you to name it. So we'll just call this footstep. And then we want to do the same thing for the other foot. So drag it till it takes a step, and then right click. And this time we can just go to skeleton notifies because it's already created, and we can select the footsteps one again, so we don't have to create a new one. So now we have our two footstep notifies hooked up. And then we want to go back to the run and just do the same thing real quick. So right here, add notify, skeleton notifies footstep, and do the same thing for this foot. Add notify, skeleton notify footstep. So now we have our notifies. Now we just need to listen to them. So now if we go back to the animation blueprint and we go to the event graph, if you right click and you just type footstep, it should pop up. So you can see event anim notify footstep. So this event is going to get called whenever he takes a footstep or whenever that notify gets called. So just to show you that working real quick, we'll just do a little print string, say hello, and if I play it, you can see as I walk around, every time I take a footstep, it prints out hello. All right, so inside of here, we basically just want to do a line trace down to the ground to figure out what type of material we are on, whether it be wood or grass or something else. So to do that, we're just going to do a line trace by channel. And the starting point is going to be the starting location of whatever character is associated with the animation blueprint. So to do that, we can just search for get owning actor. We can say get actor location, and that can go into the start. And for the end node, we want to use the actor location minus some value. So we'll say vector minus, and we want to subtract like 150 or some amount of value from the Z so that it goes down. And we'll just do a draw debug for duration so we can see this working real quick. So if we go ahead and run this just to kind of show you what's going on, you can see each time we take a footstep, it's just doing a line trace into the ground and checking which material we're hitting. So it's just doing a bunch of line traces. All right, so we want to branch off of here to check if we actually hit something. And if we did hit something, then we want to get the surface type that we hit. So we can drag off of this out hit event and say get surface type. And you'll notice if you actually drag over this and do like a switch statement or something, you'll see it has the default and then it has the two that we added. But that's not actually what we want to do. We're going to do it a little bit cleaner than just adding it right here. So what I did was I created a material library, which kind of helped encapsulate all this stuff and make it a little bit neater. So we're going to do that real quick. So back here in the content directory, let's see, where should we do this? I guess we can just do it right here. So right click and go to blueprints and go to, what's it called? Blueprint function library. And we'll call this material library. And this is mostly just to help keep things organized. So if we double click on this, we want to add a function up here for, called handle footstep. And this needs to take in a couple things. It needs to take in the surface type. So click the little plus button over here on the right, and we want to search for E physical surface, and we'll just call this surface. And then we want to take in the location as well. So like where the footstep took place. So this is going to be a vector, and we'll call it location. Okay, so let's just real quick hook this up, and then we'll write this function. So coming back to the animation blueprint, we want to say handle footstep. We want to hook that up to true. We want to pass in the surface type, and then the location we're going to get from this hit event as well. So if we break this, it will give us a lot more information if we hit this drop down. So we want to pass the location into the location like so. And then this is going to handle playing the sound, playing the effects, and all that good stuff. So if we come inside of here, we will go ahead and write this function next. So the first thing we want is a sequence node. So if you hold down S and then left click, it will create a sequence. You can also create this by right clicking and searching for a sequence. It's just a little bit quicker. So hook this up. So again, we want to do 2 things. We want to play the sound, and then we want to play the particle effect. So the sound we're going to play is based off of this surface type. So if we say get surface, and then we do a select off of that, and then we can say play sound at location, and hook this up to true. And so the sound is going to be whatever this returns. And for the world context, you can just search for get world context. Hook that up. And the location is going to be the location, so get location, and hook that up as well. Okay, so this part is where it makes things a lot easier for us. So for the wood, we can just select whatever sound we want to play. So we already have the sound for wood, so what did I call it? SC underscore wood footstep. And for grass, we'll call it SC underscore grass footstep. And so this one up here, the default is if you walk on something else, for example, like the stairs or whatever, it will use whatever you have here. So I'm not going to have anything here, so if I walk on something besides grass or wood, it's not going to play a sound. But if you wanted to have a default sound that just played if you were on something that didn't have its own unique sound, then you would select it right here. All right, so let's just go ahead and test this real quick before we do the particle effect. So if we run this, and I walk around, you can see it's playing the grass sound. And when I go to the wood, it starts playing the wood sound. So that seems to be working pretty good. And then likewise, we can do, likewise, we can do the particle effect as well. So there's a node called, actually, let's copy, well, no, let's just rewrite. So there's a node called spawn emitter at location. And we ultimately want to do that. So drag this down here, make a little reroute node to make it a little bit cleaner. And again, the world context, I'm just going to copy and hook this up. And then we want to do the same type of thing. So I'm going to copy the surface, and we're going to do a select node, except this time the select node is going to be for the particle effect to spawn. So we'll hook that up. And the location is once again the location from before. And one thing just to note real quick, so this is set to auto destroy, which means you don't have to like keep track of it or delete it itself. The particle effect will get deleted once the particle effect finishes playing. So that's why we don't have to worry about deleting it. All right, so inside of here, we just need to select which particle effects we want. So from my testing, the ones that I found that looked kind of good, because again, these are just from a random particle effect pack. They're not specific for these materials. But the ones I used were the footstep, WA, which I think means walking, and then 2 for wood. And then for grass, I used the one called dust drag. Yeah, this P send dust drag 01. And again, feel free to use whatever materials or whatever particle effects you want for this. And then I also found that it helped if I moved it up a little bit so it didn't spawn like directly at the foot, but a little bit above the ground. So I did a vector plus right here and just added like 10 to it just so it's a little bit above the ground. And like so. All right, so now if we go ahead and run this, you can see we're getting a particle effect that shows up at our feet. And we get another one that shows up here. So all in all, I think I reversed these on accident, actually. This one's supposed to be dust drag And this one is supposed to be the footstep 2. There we go. Yeah, so this is what I had at the beginning. But again, these are just random sound effects and materials that I had. And again, if I walk up on something that I don't have a material set for, you can see it doesn't play a sound and it doesn't play a particle effect because I just have nothing set up inside of this section here. So yeah, this library is kind of helpful because you can add other functions in here, like like handle bullet impact, and then you can do the same type of thing. You can have this take in the surface type, and then you can do a switch or a select node and play different particle effects based on the material type. So that's essentially how you set up something like this. I'm not going to go ahead and go into bullets and all that stuff because it's basically just the exact same thing. You just do a line trace, you get the surface from the whatever you hit, just like this, and then you can use that surface to determine what type of sound you want to play, what type of particle effect, and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I think that pretty much concludes the tutorial. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks.